Excellent. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Intro to Fusion 360 for Glowforge users. I'm your host, Jason Lichtman, and I'm very happy to be here today. Today is webinar number 3 of 6. That's what we have planned for you, and I'm really excited to show you what we're going to be doing today. So let's go over our agenda, and then we'll get to the good stuff. So, just like last time and the time before that, I'm going to welcome you, which I already did. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself in case you haven't seen the other webinars. I'm going to go over, we're going to do a poll of the audience, again, just like last time, to get a better feel for who's in the audience and therefore cater the rest of it to you guys. And then we're going to focus today on how to design a stacked 2D layer product. Now, it's a funny phrase. I kind of made it up. But basically, we're going to be working on a product that is a bunch of two-dimensional layers that are stacked on top of each other. So think of it as, it could be a bathy, I believe it's called a bathymetric map, which is the map of the depth of the sea, or maybe it's a topographical map, or in this particular case, it's going to be a really cool laser antelope. I hope you guys like it. So let's begin. Okay, so a little bit about me. My name is Jason Lichtman, and I look like the guy that you see in the corner of your screen right now. On a really good hair day, I look like the guy that's kind of more on the right side of your screen. My name is Jason Lichtman, and my background is in mechanical engineering. I studied mechanical engineering for my bachelor's degree as well as my master's, and I love designing things. Really, it's my passion. I love taking a product idea and turning it into a real thing that could either be just enjoyed for fun, given away as a gift, or perhaps even sold as a consumer product. So consumer product design and development is my jam. I have been doing it for about a decade, working in the industry for big companies like Trek Bicycle or Easton Bell Sports, which you guys would know as Bell helmets or Giro helmets, for skiing, snowboarding, bicycle, motorcycle, all of the above. I've kind of done it all. And my specialty has always been kind of the design of organic shapes. So if you think of like on a motorcycle helmet or things like that, really organic shapes that you might see. And nowadays I'm applying that to working here at Autodesk. This particular webinar is not endorsed or brought to you by Glowforge itself. It is brought to you by Jason Lichtman here at Autodesk. And the reason why I wanted to do this was because I, like you, am a Glowforge owner or Glowforge backer, depending on whether you have your Glowforge already. But mine, by the way, is set to arrive, believe it or not, sometime between 11:30 a.m. today and 3:30, and I'm really excited. And so that means that just after we get off this webinar, it might show up. I'm really excited for the possibility that it does. So I might even have to get out of this office early today. And anyway, I got off track. I wanted to bring this to you guys because I see a lot of you guys are using 2D programs like Inkscape, CorelDRAW, and Illustrator for a lot of your design. And then when it comes to 3D, I saw a lot of you guys are using Fusion 360, and I thought it would be great to have training that's specific to your application, which is using the Glowforge. And I look at all the videos that are online, and there are a lot of really great videos, and there's a lot of great content, but none of it is really focused for what you guys are doing in particular. And so I wanted to create some content for you by someone that's really part of your community, by me. And so that's what we have here today. Again, today is part 3 of 6. If you haven't already watched part 1 and part 2, I encourage you to do so. I will warn you that the audio quality on part 2 is not stellar. I think you're going to get better audio today. Although the setup is the same as last time, our office is a little bit bare bones today because of upcoming Thanksgiving. So by the way, happy Thanksgiving to everyone. So I think our audio is going to be a little bit better. And so let's begin. Okay. Nope, got out of there. So I told you earlier, we're going to be designing a 2D stacked layer product. And so in this particular case, we have this really cool antelope, and we're going to be showing you how to take it from a sketch all the way to 2D. I'm going to stop my personal video here, and this way we get to focus more on the rest of it. Let's do that. There we go. Okay, so today we're going to be focusing on this, and it's a really cool antelope designed by a colleague of mine named Chad Lockhart. He's excellent. He comes from a background in industrial design, and we worked together way back when at the great Trek bicycle making company. And now we get to work together here at Autodesk. And I asked him, I was like, you know, I need to make some really cool content for these Glowforge users. I wanted to make something that's a 2D stacked layers, something awesome. You know, faux taxidermy is really popular right now. Can you mock me up something cool like a deer head or antelope or something? And he came back and showed me some really cool stuff, and I couldn't resist using that today. As a preview of what we're going to be doing on the next webinar, we're going to be taking a very similar design, the same sketch, and we're going to turn it into same 2D stacked layers, but this time a much more 3D. Because if you notice right now, all of these layers are all parallel to each other. It's really just stacked on top, and that's it. But if you wanted to turn this into a 3D thing, you could do that as well. And so this is the same design, and this time you're going to see that it has a plaque as the background, and the design itself is mirrored on the left and the right side. So it doesn't matter which side you're looking at this from, it's cool either way. And we're going to be going over how to take the similar design as today and show you how to make it more 3D like this and add a plaque as well. And we're going to be doing that on the next webinar. Timing to be determined. It has not been scheduled yet. By the way, we have quite a few attendees in today's webinar. If you have any questions whatsoever as I'm going along, there are two places you can put those questions. You can do it under the Q&A section here in Zoom meeting, and then there's also a chat window within Zoom, the Zoom webinar. Feel free to ask any questions you'd like. I, in fact, encourage you to ask questions, because if you don't, I'll just be rambling for about an hour straight. And it would be really great if you could rein me in however you'd like. So I'm going to continue on. So we said today we're going to be focusing on this antelope and how we made it. So the first thing we have to do is come up with a plan on what we're actually going to design. So in this case, it's going to come in the form of sketches. Let's come here into my folder and let's take a look at what we have. We're going to go under here, and I believe my images, I believe it's going to be this one. Nope. Go back. There we go. No, also not. Hold on just a moment, everyone. There, I finally found it. I apologize for the delay. All right, cool. So Chad Lockhart, industrial designer extraordinaire, drew this up for us, and it's really, really cool. I mean, he's a fantastic artist. And so this is what he drew up, and we're going to say, how do we take this and actually apply it into our 3D environment in Fusion 360? By the way, he did create multiple different sketches, and so you could see here a couple of different options. You can see some Legos in the background and some things like that. But you could see, I want you to focus on, you have different variations here between the different designs. And the entire time, Chad is really trying to figure out what proportions he likes, what does he want as his plan. And once he comes up with a plan, you know, he is going to have one of these in particular that hopefully he likes better than the rest. And that's what we're going to actually use today. So I'm going to go back into Fusion, and I believe we showed this on the very first webinar, but if we were to start from scratch here, I'm going to show you like a new design. We're going to say insert attached canvas, and the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to ask me where do I want to put the canvas. So I'm going to use the right plane, and that's this plane right over here. If you're ever wondering which one's which, look in the top right corner on this view cube. You could see that this is showing me a front view, a right view, and a top. And if I look at the same thing, I could see that the front view is parallel to the Y and the X, like that plane. And the right view is parallel to the YZ. And that also can be looked up over here on this origin area on the left. I can come in here and choose the right plane by picking YZ, or I could just pick it visually in the center of the graphics window. So I'm going to pick that, and now I get to pick my image. And it turns out in my laser cutting folder under laser antelope, I have image number 1. And when I bring this in, I want you to notice that the scale, I'm going to look at this in a right view, is really small, or at least it seems small. But I can change this anytime I want by simply grabbing on this manipulator and stretching it out. I can also use the up manipulator to drag up and down, the left manipulator to drag left and right, and then I could drag this square, and then it lets me drag anywhere I want. So I can set this up however I want, and then I can also scale this however I want. But if I have a size that I'm thinking that I want to use, then we should set that up as well. Now, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment, but before we do, there are a couple of settings I like to turn on. I like to turn on display through, which is going to allow any 3D object that you create in front of this image to be semi-transparent, so you can actually see the image through the 3D object. And then also what's going to help that, especially for sketching, is going to be to change the canvas opacity down. You can pick anything you want, something like, it's really anything you want, 50%, whatever. I don't pay too much attention to this. As long as I can see that it's like semi-transparent, then I'm good. Then I have this folder here called Canvases. And if I click on the Canvas folder, I have my image, and I can right-click on it and choose Calibrate. And the cool thing with Calibrate is I could pick any 2 points, like maybe the point of the nose of the antelope and the very far area on the back of the antelope, and I can now see a distance between the two and choose how big I want this to be. So this could be any size you want, whatever you want is fine. I could pick 12 inches, even though you saw a metric a second ago. Hit OK, it scales it up, and when I zoom out, now the distance from this side of the antelope to the back of the antelope is about 12 inches. Right? So that's really helpful for sizing. Now that I have this, then I can start to actually make my sketch. So I have this thing, I'm going to go on the same plane as before. That was the right plane or the YZ plane. I can right click and say create sketch, and now my goal is to actually trace my image. So I have all these tools in this sketch drop down that I can use. I can use lines, rectangles, and we have 3 different kinds of rectangles, circles, and we have like 5 different kinds of circles, arcs, polygons, ellipses, slots, splines, which are kind of a more advanced technique that I don't think I'm going to go over unless we end up having a lot of time at the end. I'll go over splines. We have points, we can do text, and then these things at the bottom are basically modifying existing sketch geometry. But if you want to start off and create new geometry, it's these things right over here. And so let's start off and figure this out as we go. So I'm going to start, lines are obviously the simplest, right? Lines are going to be straight. So if I pick a point and then I let go with my mouse and then I drag the mouse and I click again, I'm going to end up with a literally a straight line. And if I click again, it can basically continue and make as many lines as I want. That's not exactly what I want in this case. So let's delete this whole thing and try again. This time I'm going to use the L key on my keyboard, which is a shortcut. You notice that the mouse itself, the actual cursor, changes to an icon that actually represents that we're going to do a line. And again, I'm going to click on the first spot, I'm going to click on the second, and this time I'm going to hit the Enter key and it finishes the line. Now, technically speaking, this is actually, it's sort of following the sketch in that the points are in the right place. But notice that the sketch itself realistically was curved here. It wasn't really straight. So I don't think a line is actually going to be the best choice. But we do have another tool here called Arc that I think is perfect for most of what you're going to see here on our antelope. So I'm going to pick this 3-point arc, and this time I'm going to click in the first place, click in the second, and then when I move my mouse, it's actually making an arc that the radius or the diameter of the arc changes based on where I click the 3rd time. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to click a 3rd time in this spot right there. And now I have a traced area of my sketch that I think is actually looking much better than the straight line. Now, I could do a couple of things. I could leave this exactly how it is and just continue on. And if you recall from our previous webinars, if you have a line that's blue or any actual sketch entity that's blue, it means that you can move it. So I could click on this and drag it and it'll move. And moving it is both good and bad, right? In this case, I'm following my sketch behind me and I know that this is actually where I want it to be, so I really don't want it to move. Now, we talked about how you can make things not move, right? And the way you could do that is basically 2 ways. You can apply constraints that are here on the right-hand side. Like I could say that I want this circle, and I'm going to make this up right now. This circle and this circle, I want to make the center of those 2 things coincident. And now they're going to force themselves to always be on top of each other, even though I could still drag the diameter. That's one way. Those are constraints. The other way I could do it is apply dimensions. And so I could say something like I want the diameter of this circle to be this amount. And then I could say that I want, let's say, the circle to rest on my origin, and then it's going to turn black. And when it turns black, that means that you can't move it anymore. At least you can't drag it. I could still change my dimension, but I can't actually drag it, and that's why it's black. But if I get rid of my dimension, hit delete, now it's blue again. Now there is a trick for you, another thing you could do. If you want to see what the size is as you're dragging it, I'm going to hit undo so that my dimension pops up again. This time I'm going to right click on my dimension and I'm going to choose toggle to driven. And now you're going to see parentheses on the outside of the dimension. And what that means is that I can actually still drag my circle in this case, and the dimension changes. And basically, this dimension is in the passenger seat. I'm driving the size by dragging, and this dimension itself is being driven. It's being sitting in the passenger seat while I drive the vehicle that changes the size. I hope that makes sense. And please feel free to write in the comment section right now if that did not make sense, and I will try to explain that differently. But basically, I can apply dimensions and I can apply constraints. Now, there is a third way that you can make things not move, and that is to basically say that I want to lock this thing into position. And the way you do that is a constraint here called fix or unfix. And when you say, let's say I pick this circle and I choose fix, now you're going to see that it turns green. And the green is telling you that this thing is fixed. And so no matter if I put constraints on this or not, like if I just draw a circle in space and I click on it and say fixed, no matter what, the center and the actual diameter is all going to turn green and is not going to be movable. I can't drag this anymore. If I do want to be able to move it, I can click on this again, click the fix or unfix again. Now it unlocked it down, and now I could still move it around or reposition it. And for something like this, where you're sketching on top of an image, I think that locking things down is actually going to be your friend. So in this case, I'm going to pick this arc, and I'm going to fix it in space. Notice, by the way, that the arc itself is green, but the endpoints are white. And that means that I could still drag these around, right? But I actually want those to lock in space as well. So I'm going to pick these 2 points, hold control between clicks so that I can select both of them, and I'm going to choose fixed for that as well. Now, I do want to show you a variation real quick before I move on. If I'm going to undo all of that. Perfect. So now I still have the blue version, and if I pick the endpoints only and I fix those, I can't move the ends anymore, but the arc also has a diameter, and I did not lock that down yet. And so if I zoom out, I could see the center of my diameter, and I can actually come in here and move that and still change the size. So for something like an arc or a circle, or rather an arc in particular, you are going to need to lock down the endpoints and the middle as well. So now I pick the middle and I say fixed. Perfect. So now I want to come in here and basically I want to do the same thing over and over again until I get what I'm looking for. So I have an arc like that, and I'm going to fix that in space. I'm going to take this endpoint, and I'm going to fix that in space. I'm going to do the same thing again. Maybe this time I'm going to go like this, something like that. You know what? I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking it's probably, this is actually supposed to be straight. So let's draw a line from the end over here to this point over there, and I'm going to lock the end of that line. And that by default means the entire line is now locked down. But the base of this line isn't exactly in the right spot. So like before, I can click on this endpoint, hit the lock button again, and it unlocks it. And now I can come in here and adjust this slightly until I get it where I want, and then I could lock it down again. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this a little bit faster now. Perfect. Lock that down. And we don't unfortunately have a keyboard shortcut to fix things in space, at least at this point. It's a little unfortunate, but we are working on being able to lock things down, to be able to customize shortcuts. And that's something that is on our radar and we're working on. Perfect. So now I'm doing a line. I'm going to fix this line. Perfect. And that point right there. Perfect. And so now I'm going to go ahead and do this, and I'm going to jump ahead slightly and show you what this is going to look like when it's done, right? Because we only have 38 minutes left, and I don't think you're going to want to see me sketching over and over and over again. But what I do want you to know is that what I'm sketching here is really a combination of arcs and lines based on this particular geometry. I don't really see anything more complicated than that here, so that's pretty much what I'm using. And if we go to this part, which is our finished one, let's go look at what our finished sketch looks like. Perfect. And notice again, just like before, everything is green. All the endpoints are green as well, which means everything is locked down. And you do also have these orange circles here that I added that weren't there at the very beginning. I'm going to intentionally not tell you what those are yet. We're going to show you those later in this lesson. But all in all, I have this a lot more detailed sketch than when I started. And let's show you what the canvas looked like. So this is the background image, and you could see all of my line work on top. And is this perfect? Absolutely not, right? I did this pretty quickly. I didn't make this perfect. And also keep in mind that your sketch that you're using as the background really is just a background image. And you don't have to actually follow it. It's really just intended, for the most part, to be there as a guide for you to make your design. But what I want you to stress here is that the design itself is not the sketch. The design is what you're drawing in Fusion. And so as long as you're happy with what you're drawing in Fusion itself, I don't really care if it matches the sketch that you drew behind it. I mean, for the most part, you want the same design intent, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And so if you look over here, like the nose of my sketch is not exactly in the same spot as I drew, sorry, the nose of my sketch in Fusion is not in the same place as my sketch from behind that, the actual 2D sketch that came from Chad Lockhart. And what I do want to note is, let's get rid of this canvas. And I want you to notice that the actual antelope has this yellow fill in between all the green lines. And depending on where I hover with my mouse, you could see different areas of my sketch actually would come and highlight. And the way Fusion works is that it looks for a closed loop of sketches. And so something like, we're going to draw on top of this right now, if I draw a rectangle and then another rectangle slightly overlapping, I could want to do something with this area right here, or this area, or a combination of this however I want. And what basically Fusion is doing is showing you all of the different combinations. So let's get rid of that square, that rectangle, and this one too. And here I have my sketched antelope. And we're going to stop the sketch. You know, I'm happy with that so far. And let's go through line by line with what's happening here in my timeline to see how I actually built it. So another thing to note, by the way, I should have said this at the very beginning. I did create an additional sketch, and that sketch represents the size of the Glowforge bed, which currently is 11 inches tall and 19.5 inches wide. Then I actually made an offset of 1/4 inch, and you could see that dimension right over here. And to do that, let's get rid of it, and then we'll rebuild it, and you'll see exactly how I did it. Let's pretend I'm doing this from scratch. I hit the letter R on my keyboard, and I make a rectangle. Then I hit the letter D on my keyboard, and I put a dimension for the width of this thing, 19.5. Then I clicked on this left vertical line, clicked again, and hit 11 for 11 inches. And then I double tapped on the entire thing and hit this little box over here called construction. And the reason I did it is because we're not going to actually use this to build anything. I'm using it more as a reference to make sure that everything that I build in Fusion is actually going to fit in the Glowforge bed. And so I don't really need it to be a closed line. In fact, by keeping it dotted as construction, it's going to let me not select it by accident, which is going to be helpful. So I do encourage you to make a construction. Then I can double tap on any of these lines and it automatically selects the entire rectangle. Then I can come under Sketch, Offset, and I could drag this in so I make sure it's inside my box. And I could type in 0.25, enter, and I chose 0.25 inches, but you could choose whatever you want. But basically, we all know that the camera on the Glowforge is not perfect, and the alignment could be off by about 1/4 inch. And so what I'm doing is making sure I stay 1/4 inch away from the edges of my material so that I don't accidentally laser off of the material and waste a chunk of my material, right? So by keeping it within the boundaries, then I'm not going to have any issues there. Think of this, if you come from a background in graphic design, think of this as like my bleed area for my part. So I'm going to undo all of this because I already had this set up. Get rid of all that. Perfect. And so the cool thing here is when I actually brought in my image, I made sure that my image itself, let's go and edit that. There we go, is within the boundaries of my Glowforge. So this way I make sure that no matter what, I'm not making the scale too big so that I can't even laser cut this on the Glowforge. It's all within the bed and it's going to work out no problem. So this is just a preview of how I set this up. And I also set it up, by the way, so that the back of the antelope is actually on the same area as the front plane of my part. And that's as though like this were sticking out of like a sidewall. Like I basically took this entire thing and I shoved it in the corner of my wall against the wall next to it. Okay, so now that we have our sketches, let's actually take a look at that. And we're going to go back in time on my timeline. And to do that, I'm going to drag my mouse until I get to here, click with my left mouse button, and I'm going to drag backwards. And basically now I am at the moment in time where the sketch for the antelope has already been created, but the 3D stuff has not yet been created. And so we're going to go and actually do that ourselves. So to do that, I'm going to click on the Extrude button here, right? And you can see a pop-up telling me what I'm actually doing. And when I do that, I have to select a profile. And just like before when I was in that sketch, I can actually hover over here and see all of the different options I have available to me, right? Let's actually bring up our canvas, and then it'll be easier for me to select. I know that the first layer is basically going to be all of these things combined. So I select here, I can select here, select there, select this, and I believe, I could be wrong, but I think we're going to add that too. And then we're going to add this piece, and we're even going to add this little sliver in. So all I'm doing, I'm not even holding control, I'm just selecting, and then I have to choose how thick do I want to make this thing. So I can pull this any amount that I want. Let me zoom out and you can see what's happening there. I could pull this any amount that I want, 11 inches, 12 inches, whatever I'm preferring. But realistically, we're going to want a thickness that's set to whatever material we're going to use. So for now, I'm just going to hit OK, even though I know that dimension is wrong. And I'm going to go under Modify, Change Parameters. And here you're going to see that I have a bunch of parameters that I created for myself. To create a new parameter, I come in and hit the plus symbol, and I type in the name of my parameter, choose what units I want to type in, like inches, for example, and then a value. That's what the expression. So I have one here called thickness, and it's set to 3 millimeters. Oh, excuse me, everyone. Sorry for that sneeze. I set the thickness to 3 millimeters. And then I have another one here called minimum material. And I don't think we're going to be using that today, but I created that anyway. And then I created one called kerf. And I don't really know what the kerf is going to be on the Glowforge. I didn't really look it up. But for now, it's set up to 0.001 inches. And then I also made another parameter for the alignment pin diameter. We haven't gone over this, but we are going to make alignment pins to make it easier for us to align everything. And I believe the alignment pins are going to be 1/8 of an inch, so I set them up to 1/8 of an inch. Cool. Now remember the names that you chose here because you're going to end up needing to type those in later. Cool. So far, we created our sketch, and then we extruded a profile. That's this giant thing here. And our thickness is incorrect, so let's go and fix that. I'm going to come here to my feature, that was the extrude, and I could right-click on it, say Edit Feature, and then I could change the thickness from 8 inches to anything I want. But we created a user parameter called thickness. So all I have to do is type in thickness, and you can see here one comes up, and when I hit it and say OK, notice that everything is actually quite thin right now. And it's thin because it's now the same thickness as we chose for the thickness parameter. And that was 3 millimeters. And that's roughly, I believe, what the medium proof grade material is. But of course, you could adjust this based on, a caliper measurement of the real material. So now I have this panel, and we want to create the next layer in this thing. So let's go and take a look at our sketch again. Actually, I'm going to hide the existing thing. And to hide the existing thing, I'm going to go under Bodies, and I'm going to turn this light bulb for this body. And by the way, I might want to name this thing. And so maybe this is called layer, hold on. I actually think we're going to call it layer 01. That's simple. Okay, now we're going to go and create layer number 2. So I'm going to hide layer 1. I'm going to show my sketch again, and then I'm going to make another extrude. And now I have to pick, what do I want this other thing to be? So let's look at our real sketch again. And I could see I'm probably wanting this area and this area. And let's look at this in more detail. Probably this area as well. This one, that one, and this sliver. And I think we're not done yet. I think that's, now I think we have it. And don't, by the way, it doesn't matter if I'm wrong because I can always come back and adjust this. Okay, so like I really want to stress this, that there is no wrong way to do this because you can always go back and change things. Now I'm going to drag this arrow to a certain thickness, and you know, we don't need it 3 inches. We already decided it's going to be the same thickness for everything. So I type in thickness, perfect, and I say okay. Now if I hide my sketch and I hide my canvas, this is what I got. Now, I know I messed up here. You guys might not have realized it already, but I definitely messed up. If I show layer 1, any idea what's going to happen right now? If you have a chance, type in really quickly into the Q&A or the chat window, what's going to happen if I highlight to show layer 1 and I'm also showing layer 2? Okay, no one's answering, so I'm just going to continue. I'm going to show layer 1, and it looks to me like layer 1 and layer 2 are right on top of each other, right? We wanted this to be stacked, and it's not. So there are a couple of ways I could do this, right? I could actually leave this as it is and laser cut it and just put all these stacked together by hand, right? And that's no big deal. But if I want to visualize what this is going to look like before I ever make it, I'm going to want the 3D model to reflect what it's going to look like in real life. So a couple of ways I could do that. The first way is the way I don't prefer. I'm going to click this Move Copy command, and I'm going to choose layer 2, and then I'm going to come over here to the Move Type and say Translate, and I could drag this arrow, and I could move this anywhere I want. And then this is going to start to look 3D, but keep in mind, I'm probably going to have to come in here and choose exactly how much I want to move it so that it actually is layered the way I want it to be. And I could do it that way, but I don't really love this method as a whole. So, and by the way, if you want to know the distance, instead of typing in a distance here, you can actually also type in that same parameter, like thickness, and then in theory, it's actually going to move it to the exact right position because it moved it the thickness of one layer over, and as a result, it's in the right spot. So even if I change the value for this thickness, everything is still going to move into the right location. That's pretty handy, and I would say it's like a little bit more of an advanced tip, but I think it'll be handy for you. Now, I don't like that method overall, is what I said from the beginning, although you can do it that way if you'd like. So instead, I'm going to right-click on this move, and I'm going to delete it, and we're going to start from scratch and figure out a new way to do it. And the new way to do it is going to be to edit the extrude itself that created the layer number 2. We're going to right-click and say Edit Feature, and we're going to figure out a new way to do it. Now, we have a couple of options here I have to point out. So one of them is the Start. And I could choose, do I want to start this shape from the profile plane, meaning where the sketch was, an offset plane, meaning a new plane that I pick, or an object, and I could pick pretty much anything I want for an object, like a point or a face of my 3D object, and all that kind of stuff. Also, I could choose the direction I want to extrude this. Do I want to go one direction? Do I want to go 2 directions? If I do go 2 directions, do I want it to go the same amount in both directions? And if so, it's called symmetric. And I could choose, do I want it to go a certain distance, or do I want it to go to a certain object, or do I want to go all the way through, which really applies to cuts, although it can apply to joins as well and things like that. But for now, let's make this a little simpler. So I'm going to tell you the answer. I want to start at an object. And the object in this case is going to be the side of layer number 1. And I want you to see the preview of what just happened. So layer number 1 started at my sketch and then went to the right by the thickness of our proof grade material. Layer number 2 is going, even though the sketch itself is over here on this left side, is going to start making the 3D stuff from the end of layer 1 and then go the thickness of our proof grade material. And again, the way I did that was choosing Start from Object, and then I chose an object as this side of my layer number 1. And when I say OK, it's actually automatically in the right spot. That's absolutely perfect. Let's go and do that again for layer number 3. So I'm going to hide layer 1 and 2, turn on my sketch, turn on my canvas so I could see exactly what I want to select, and then I'm going to hit Extrude, and I'm going to choose this area here, this area, I believe this as well, and I could be wrong here, and I think that's it. Again, I could be wrong, but I think that's it. Now that I've done that, let's hide the canvas. Notice I'm still showing my extrude toolbar here. And then I'm going to turn on layer 1 and layer 2, and let's go and do the same thing like before. I'm going to change my start from profile plane to object, and this time I'm going to choose the end of layer 2 as the start of layer 3, and then for the distance, I'm going to choose thickness. And I'm going to say OK. Now, I made another mistake. I don't know if you noticed this, but in my bodies folder, I only see layer 1 and layer 2. And actually, layer 2 looks like it's super thick. Let's hide layer 1. And it looks like somehow, by accident, layer 1 and 2 are now one big thing, like one big layer, which in reality is not going to work for us at all. So let's go back to this extrude for layer 3 and right-click and say Edit Feature. And I want you to notice that at the very bottom, where it says Operation, right over here, instead of Join, I want to change it to New Body. Basically, I want a new layer for that third layer. And now when I say OK, I see layer 1, layer 2, and layer 3. Perfect. Now, to make this a little bit easier to see, this would be a great time that I could apply colors to my model. So I'm going to hit the letter A on my keyboard. That's a shortcut for our Appearances window. And I have a bunch of wood set up already, but even if I didn't and I wanted to paint this a different color, I got to say I want to paint, and I'm going to choose paint. Maybe I'm going to pick a glossy paint, and I could pick blue. And all I'm going to do is drag it onto one of these objects. And now that one's blue. I'm going to take the green one and put it as layer 2. And then I'm going to take maybe the red and drag it to layer 3. Cool. Now it's just a little easier for me to see these. And I could tell you right off the bat that I must have messed up somewhere, because although this is overall looking pretty good, this isn't what I was supposed to have, at least not by the eyeball, the eye area. So that's no problem. All I'm going to do is I'm going to show my sketch. I'm going to get rid of layer 1 and 2 visually. I'm going to right-click on layer 3's extrude and say Edit Feature. And then I'm going to go here under Profiles, and I'm going to unselect that area right there and say OK. And let's re-show everything. And now this is looking much better, right? This is looking kind of like I expected. So now let's go ahead and make layer 4. And we're going to do that just like before. I hide layer 1, 2, and 3. Then I'm going to show my sketch, and I'm going to go to Extrude. And now this time, when I show my canvas, I'm going to pick this area right here. I'm going to hide my canvas again. I'm going to show my layers. And then I'm going to say I want to start instead of profile plane from object. And I'm going to pick the end of layer 3. And then for my distance, I'm going to choose thickness. Perfect. And it looks like just like before, I wasn't paying attention enough. And so layer 3 and 4 were combined. But I could fix that again just so easily. Edit Feature, instead of Join, New Body, and say OK. And again, just like before, I could go under Appearances, and I could pick another color and drag that for layer 4. Cool. When I hide my sketch, now I have my object. Now, it does look like I messed up in other areas. And by the way, these mess ups, I'm doing these on purpose so you could see that messing up is not really a big deal. Messing up is just part of your design process. There is no failure here, right? The only failure is giving up, and I don't want you to give up. So let's go back and see let's look at what our end result is supposed to be, and then we'll be able to really easily see where we messed up. So I'm going to hide the stuff we just did. And it looks like, if I zoom in a little bit, I did not include the nose at all. That was my mistake. And if I look in the eye area, because it's a little detailed, I think we messed up a little bit on the eye area as well. I think layer 2 was supposed to be a little bit different than I actually had it. And so no big deal, we're gonna come back here and actually fix all of that. So again, I go back in time slightly. Cool. Now we're back to where we were a moment ago. And I'm gonna rename this as well, layer 04. Perfect. And we can go back and fix things. So I'm gonna go back to layer 1, and I'm gonna edit the feature, show my sketch, and it looks like I want to get rid of this area of the nose. And then I believe also this area here was supposed to be filled in. Perfect. That's looking better. Layer number 2 was also messed up. Let's go back and fix that. And this time it was supposed to be open like so. I believe like this. And that's looking better. And then what were we supposed to have for layer 3? There we go. And something else messed up. Let's see. I'm going to hit undo and just undo that. Perfect. Okay. So long story short, I want you to come in there and actually pick everything the way you're supposed to pick it. Making a mistake is no big deal. It's really easy to just go back and reselect what you actually want. And when you're done, I want you, and I'm just going to delete what we did right now because I've already had this done already. And we're going to show what this is supposed to look like. And it's supposed to look like this. Perfect. So in this particular case, instead of paint colors, I applied wood colors, and I showed different species of wood for each of the different layers. But whatever you prefer is totally cool. That's no problem at all. And so now that I have this, let's talk about two things. One is, how are we going to align this all together? And then also, how are we going to put this into the Glowforge, right? So in terms of aligning together, I like the method of using alignment pins. And we're going to show that right now. And so remember at the very beginning when I looked at that sketch, I showed you that I have two circles here. So let's take a look at this really up close. So I have a circle, and that circle represents a 1/8 inch dowel pin. And notice that the diameter here is set to alignment pin diameter that we actually set in our settings. So that's already automatically 1/8 of an inch. Then I made an offset of that 1/8 inch circle with a smaller one, and the distance for that offset is going to be kerf. Perfect. And the reason, of course, is because when I make the hole for the dowel pin, the laser itself is going to burn some material on both sides of the vector pattern. And so the hole itself is going to be slightly bigger than you might have intended. And so if you intentionally undersize the lasered hole based on the kerf width, or rather half of the kerf width, then the result is going to be that the hole is going to fit the dowel pin perfectly. And to learn more about kerf, I highly suggest you play around on the Glowforge forums and search kerf, and you're going to find lots of really cool stuff. But in short, that's how I would do that right here. And these circles I can actually place anywhere I want. I didn't lock them in space yet, but when I am ready to lock them, I could also just hit the fix button and then do the same thing for this one wherever I think it should be, and then that's going to lock in space as well. Cool. So now that I have that, basically what I did was I went and extruded some pins. I'll show you that. We're going to hide each of these layers. There we go. So what I did was I extruded two pins that are 1/8 inch dowel pins, and I extruded them from the start of where my sketch was all the way, not through every single layer, but through all of the layers except for layer number 4. Unfortunately, if you try to put alignment pins through every single layer, including the outermost layer, you're going to see circles that look kind of like this, and you might find them ugly. I personally do. And so in this case, I'm actually aligning layers 1, 2, and 3, and then layer 4, unfortunately, would have to be aligned by hand. But that's still better than aligning everything by hand. And so I'm a big fan of doing it this method. And so what I did was I made my pin, and we're going to go and edit that and take a look. And the settings are basically to start where the sketch was drawn, and then to go to an object. And the object that I picked, believe it or not, was the back side of layer number 4. By choosing the back side of layer 4, that means that the length of this pin is going to go all the way up to the back of layer 4. It's the perfect length. And I did, by the way, the exact same thing when I made my hole, and that's this extrude right here. And the only difference, by the way, between making a new pin and making a hole is down below here choosing cut instead of new body. So just heads up on that. And I made a cut from where the sketch was drawn all the way through these parts to the back of layer 4. Perfect. Now we're going to get to the really fun stuff, which is actually taking this and putting it in the Glowforge and figuring out the right orientation to do that. So we're going to do this live, and let's start that off right now. I'm going to look at this in the right view. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to show that original sketch that we created that represents the Glowforge itself. And it looks to me like we're almost set up correctly. We're not exactly right. So let's take this thing, and believe it or not, because we didn't constrain it earlier, even though I finished making the sketch a long time ago, I can actually come in here and move this thing wherever I would like. So I'm going to set this up so that it's about here, right? And I'm taking into account keeping the edges of my parts to be at least a 1/4 inch from the edge of the actual Glowforge, again, to take into account for camera misalignment. And now that's looking really good. Now we actually are going to move each of the components, rather each of the bodies, to new positions so that we can laser cut it. So I'm going to come up here and choose Move, and then I'm going to choose Bodies, and it wants me to select a body. So I'm going to pick this one right here. That was layer number 2. Then I'm going to choose this thing called Free Move. Now, if I don't choose Free Move, I'll tell you what's going to happen. You can move up, and you can move left or right, up or down, that is, or left or right, but you can't rotate at the same time. So if you wanted to rotate, I would have to say OK, and then say make another move. This time I'm going to rotate and choose what I'm going to rotate based on. And I could even use these holes as the center, and then I could rotate this however I'd like. Oh, I have to select this thing first. Just a moment. Yeah, what's happening? Let's try that again. We're going to hit Move. We're going to pick this body. I'm going to choose Rotate. I'm going to choose maybe the center of this pin, and then I could rotate this however I want. But then if I want to move it again, guess what? I have to make a third move. So instead, I'm going to delete that move command. We're going to start it from scratch. We're going to say Move, pick this thing, and this time I'm going to choose this Free Move. And Free Move is now going to add new manipulators over here. Basically, I can move this thing, and I could rotate it, and I could move it all in one shot, so to speak. And I love this because it means that I could actually place this a little bit more exactly on my Glowforge bed and get this exactly where I want it. Perfect. Cool. Then I'm going to go and do the same thing again. This time I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut, which is the letter M on my keyboard. I'm going to pick this object. I'm going to move it, and it looks like it might not fit over there, even if I rotate and everything. But we could try. Not really going to happen. You know what? Actually, I'm liking this. We're going to take this, and then now I'm going to hit the letter M again. This time I'm going to pick all of these components. And all we're going to do here is we're going to do just a move, and we're going to move it to the right a little bit. Just a little bit more. And now I'm going to hit another move. Now, in this particular case, I don't really care how many moves it takes me. The result is going to be that I want this just to fit within the Glowforge. And you know what? I'm not really liking this either. So actually, I'm going to hit Cancel. We're going to delete the last one. And we're going to choose to move this part, this lighter wood color. We're going to move that all the way over because really we don't have any room over there. Maybe we're going to rotate this around. Much better. Cool. Now, one thing I did differently in the past than the one that we were doing live is actually I chose to make this first layer 2 separate layers that are exactly the same as each other. And I do want to point that out because I'm going to have to move one of those as well. So I'm going to move that one. I'm going to choose this free move. Up, wrong view. Right view. We're going to move this thing as well. We're going to do some manipulation to it. Much better. Again, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to type them in. I don't have any questions listed right now. I don't see any there. but please ask away. Excellent. Now I am trying to make everything as close as possible to itself, so this way I have as much material free to use later as possible. All right, so keep that in mind. I would encourage you to do the same. And then this, I could even fit that right over here. Perfect. So now that I have everything laid out how I want it, I do want you to notice that the layers themselves all have different heights, right? But the laser cutter doesn't really care about that, because all it does care about is the actual profile around the edges. And so basically what we're going to do is we're going to create a profile on a single plane, and we're going to send that to the Glowforge, and then we should be good to go. So to do that, I'm going to make a new sketch. I'm going to go under Origin. I'm going to choose the, let's see, the YZ plane. Right-click and say Create Sketch. And now I'm going to use a command that you guys haven't seen before. I don't think I showed it yet, which is called the Project command. Under Sketch, Project, I pick this one right here, and it's a shortcut, the letter P on your keyboard. And now what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to come in here and select each of these objects one at a time. And I want you to notice that the profile around it is turning pink. Cool. When I exit out of that, I want you to actually see that in detail. So I'm going to hide the bodies. And now what you're left with is the exact shape of those parts, right, in one dimension, one sketch that's looking perfect. Excellent. And again, the pink represents a projected geometry, which means the shape that you see there is based on some sort of thing earlier in time. That thing could be another sketch, it could be a 3D shape. It's usually going to be one of those two. But basically, you could project geometry and use it. Now, for our sake, we're going to take this, and we're going to take this sketch, and we're going to rename it. So this is going to be called Sketch for Glowforge UI. And I'm going to right-click on this thing, and I'm going to say Save. There are two ways we could do this if you watched the last week's webinar. I'm going to say Save as DXF, and I'm going to choose here Antelope ready for Glowforge, Rev1, and I'm going to save it as my DXF. Now, DXF is not accepted by the Glowforge, so I do have to open up another program. In this case, I'm going to use Illustrator. Illustrator opening up right now. Come on. There we go. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to open that same file, right? So we're going to go into my laser folder, and I believe we called this, excuse me, Antelope ready for Glowforge 1.dxf. We're going to open that up. We have to make sure our units are correct, right? So let's actually make sure that this is correct. Let's go back to our Fusion, hit stop. I'm going to take a look under document settings here, and it looks like this is already set to inches. So no big deal. And I'm going to leave this 1 unit is equal to 1 inch. Hit OK. Perfect. This is the shape, and the artboard itself is the wrong size, but it doesn't really matter because I don't really care. I'm going to say Save As, and then I'm going to choose an SVG for this. And that's all I'm using Illustrator for in this case, because the Glowforge UI is going to do the rest. I'm going to open up a web browser of my choosing. I'm going to open up the app.glowforge.com. I'm going to upload a new design, and I'm going to choose that same SVG that we just created. Perfect. And my hope is that everything is going to come in exactly the right place. Come on, Glowforge. Don't fail us now. Excellent. Let's zoom out a little bit. Now, the positioning of this thing is not exactly correct, and I think I know why. The reason is because the artboard was not correct in Illustrator. And so what I would recommend actually is to take it in Illustrator from the DXF and actually make sure that the artboard is set up to 19.5 inches by 11 inches. And then when whatever positioning you put the objects, actually let's do that all together. Artboards, artboard options, 11 tall, 19.5 wide, hit OK. And now I could go under layers, choose this entire thing, and actually put this exactly where I want it, We're going to save this as ready for the Glowforge, and we're going to make it Rev 2 so we can actually compare. Save. Perfect. And my expectation this time is that all of these objects would come into the Glowforge UI in this exact orientation. So let's go back to, there it is. We're going to go back and upload a new file. It's going to be Rev 2. And while that's happening, let's go back to the Fusion interface and show you the last way you can do this. You can also use the add-in, the one that's the Shaper utility. And if you don't have it installed, you could download it from this app store. It's called Shaper Utility. Then if it's not showing, you can go under Scripts and Add-ins, and I have an add-in here called Shaper Utilities, and I'm going to run it. So now it shows me as an icon here. You could also set it to open automatically whenever you use Fusion. This will always show up. And in this case, I'm going to say Export to Shaper. I'm going to choose a sketch. I'm going to choose that sketch right there and say OK. And this time, we're going to save this as Rev 4. So we can compare. Go back to the Glowforge UI, and this time, this is exactly what I expected. Everything is in the exact right position. This, by the way, I'm just going to repeat, is the one that was saved as a DXF, brought into Illustrator. The Illustrator artboard was changed to the correct size, and the files themselves were positioned in them correctly, and then saved as an SVG. And again, it comes in here perfectly. And then the second one, the one we're about to upload right now, which I believe is Rev 4. Hold on. There it is. This one is going to be the one that we use the Shaper utility to save the sketch as an SVG directly from Fusion. And we'll see what we get in just a moment. Again, if you have any questions so far, please type them into the Q&A section. I'm happy to answer them. And again, this is in the exact right position. So perfect. So I've shown you how to design a stacked layer object in Fusion 360. You start off by bringing in a canvas, right? Then you bring in your canvas, then you sketch on top of it. Now, I do personally recommend a single sketch for all the layers. I think that makes your life a whole lot easier. Then I extruded each of those layers into its own 3D thing, right? So let's look at that right here. I created this layer, then I created the next layer, then I created the next layer, and then the next, right? And we kept doing this until we had all of our layers. Then I introduced the alignment holes and the alignment pins. Show that again. If I hide layer 4, you should be able to see that. Those are those pins right there. Then we took all of these objects and we moved them into position relative to the actual Glowforge bed, the bed being this orange rectangle over there. And even though these were different heights, we created a single sketch that we projected the geometry from all of those objects. And that ended up being this pink sketch at the very end right here that's within the Glowforge UI. And then we showed how to save it 2 different ways. First way is right-click on the sketch and saving as a DXF, bringing that into Illustrator, and then saving that as an SVG. And then we also showed how to take the Shaper utility and export the sketch directly as an SVG. In either case, the result is uploading an SVG into the Glowforge UI to yield your laser cuttable files, right? So that's how we showed how to do that. And let's talk about what we're going to do next time. All right, so let's go back to PowerPoint here. The agenda for webinar number 4. These dates are incorrect. Hold on. There we go. Agenda for live webinar number 4 is we're going to show how to do a 3D design of stacked 2D layers in a slightly different way. We're going to show how to do this in a way that you can actually make this 3D, like the one you're seeing on the right side, that not only sticks out of the wall in one direction, but it sticks out of the wall in 2 directions, right? It has a width and a height and a depth as opposed to what you saw before. We're also going to show how to make the plaque, in this particular case, parametric, meaning you can automatically change the actual positioning of the plaque relative to everything else. So a quick little preview. If I go over here and you can see the plaque is at a particular angle, I can actually come in here under, where did I put it? There, and actually change the angle itself of my plaque, and everything is going to update automatically here within Fusion. That's pretty darn cool, and we'll show you how to do that. And let's see. That's what we're going to do for webinar number 4. Webinar number 5 is going to be to take a 3D object and to slice it into laser cuttable layers, and then how to reorient those slices for sending to your Glowforge. And live webinar number 6, the agenda for that one is yet to be determined. And so if you have something out there that you would like to see, please let me know, and I'll be happy to make that happen. This has been my absolute pleasure to demonstrate for you Fusion 360 and all it has to offer for laser cutting. Like I said, I'm a big fan of Glowforge, really excited to get my laser later today. And I'm really happy to get to show you something that I'm also very passionate about, Fusion 360, and how it applies to what you're going to be doing on your Glowforge. So thank you for participating. Again, this is live webinar number 3 of 6. And we're excited to have you next time. So stay tuned. I'll be posting to the same location. I'll be posting the schedule for webinar number 4, 5, and 6 shortly. Thank you again for attending, and have a wonderful, wonderful Thanksgiving. Enjoy time with family. And don't forget that the family, you know, they're not around forever, so make sure to spend some time with them and don't just hide in the corner using your laser. Family is everything. Have a wonderful time. Happy holidays.